My name is Davis Boudreau. I am the lobbyist for the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations, and it's my pleasure to serve as moderator today, and I want to welcome all of you. At this time, I would invite Reverend Linda Olson, the Minister of Faith in Action here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, our gracious host for the day. I would invite Reverend Olson to come up.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to just simply offer you words of welcome and moral support and gratitude to all of you for the work you're doing to help make the old dominion become a new dominion of peace and inclusion and welcome for all people. We're trying to change the climate of this state, and you're making it happen. And our congregation is particularly pleased to be in relationship with VACOLAO because we see that in your work and in the work of this organization, you're helping us put our faith into action. A lot of us, care a lot about what's going on, and we vote and we organize and we try to get our feet on the ground and make a difference. And it's so by being in coalition with folks like you that are doing the good work at the various different levels. I'm so happy to see Senator Even and board member Tejada here, and I know they're doing the work in their legislators and all of you in your own unique way. So we're so grateful to be able to host this, and of course look forward to many more opportunities. So thank you for being here, thank you for your work, and enjoy your day, and I hope you will come back here often and feel that this is a home for all of you. Thanks.
Olson. I will now invite Lenny Gonzalez to introduce our friend and founder, Walter Tejada.
Good morning. My name is Lenny Gonzalez, and I'm a member of the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations. Thank you very much for being here today. It's an honor for me to introduce one of our founders. And he'll talk about that, but also somebody who's not only a friend of the community, but a very dear personal friend. The Honorable Walter Tejada was elected to the county board on March 11 of 2003 in a special election. Many of us have very fond memories of that special election and the importance of voting that day. Mr. Walter was re-elected on November 6, 2007, and he served as the chairman of the board in 2008 and 2013. He was re-elected in 2011. As a community advocate, Mr. Tejada has distinguished himself as a leader committed to enhancing the diversity of Arlington and the region's community voice. Relentless in his commitment to promote and support civic participation and representation, Walter has been an instrumental visionary in establishment of various initiatives and programs. There are two of these initiatives that have come through the county and that are very important. The Community Volunteer Network, formerly known as the Community Role Models, and the Arlington Employment and Education Center, which helps provide opportunities for workers. The Arlington Employment is a member of VACOLAO. The executive director is Andres Tovar, and I have the pleasure to be the president of the board also. Mr. Walter has been a resident and a community leader in Arlington for more than 20 years. He's also been an active member of various organizations, the Community Foundation, United Way, Multicultural Institute. He's the former Virginia State Director of LULA, the League of United Latin American Citizens, and he continues to be a member. We're very proud to have him also in our council for 609. And a true pioneer, he's the founding chairman of the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations, the founding president of the American Salvadorian Association of Virginia, and of the Latino Democrats of Virginia. He was born in El Salvador and moved to the United States at the age of 13. And Walter, thank you very much for being here this morning and taking time from your busy agenda. Welcome, amigo.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you very much, Lenny. I appreciate the work that Lenny Gonzalez and many of the colleagues in the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations have done over the years. So it's a privilege for me to join you this morning and be part of this important conversation. And it's good to see a number of legislators already here. State Senator Adam Evan will be speaking in a moment. We have State Delegate Alfonso Lopez somewhere. And I know there will be other people that will be joining us later today. So and as Lenny was reading, I thought, how do we get involved in so much stuff? So much that I probably in another occasion, Lenny, we can make it a little shorter. Thank you. But you know, as he was reading this, I'm thinking, well, this is work that I've had the privilege to join forces with many of you throughout the years to help our community, to help create what I call the pursuit of the elusive utopia. The pursuit of the elusive utopia, right? That we try to make our society a better society, that where we all live happily ever after without any problems. It's an aspiration. It's probably something we'll never attain, but it's worth pursuing. And I say that in large part in the context of the creation, the reason the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations was founded, was created. And back in 2001, when Mark Warner was running for governor, some of us decided, you know, we need to get involved here. And it was what we felt at that time was kind of an anti-immigrant sentiment that was brewing. And some of us didn't quite see it right with us. And some of us have been advocating already through the Deal United American Citizens, felt that it was important to put an all-out effort and reach to our friends around the state of Virginia and come together. And right after Mark Warner particularly, so during his campaign, many of us met from around the state. We met Beatriz Ammerman from Virginia Beach, Tanya Gonzalez from Richmond, and a whole bunch of people from different parts of the state. And then after Mark Warner got elected, he came to speak in Springfield, and he asked me and Phil Ewell, who was the city councilor at that time, to join him. And we were in the back of one of the rooms there, waiting for him to speak, and to a large audience that was assembled there. And there was a bit of a kind of uncomfortable moment there, a little quiet moment. And he said to me, you know, Walter, you're never shy for something. What's on your mind? And I looked at him and I said, well, Governor, I said, the state of Virginia has never had a Latino summit. And it would be great if you as governor can host it. And he looked at me and goes, wow, I like that. And so then began the planning to create the first ever Latino Issues Summit that took place in the city of Alexandria, since he lived in Alexandria, so we'll do it in his hometown. And so we brought over 400 Latino leaders from throughout the state and came together for that, what we thought would be the one-time summit, where we will talk about issues that were important at that time. Well, the energy, the synergy, and the inspiration was really high. And we all felt, you know, this cannot be a one-time thing only. There has to be continuity in what can we do to create a vehicle to make that happen. And so the Virginia Coalition of Organization was born, where we had nonprofits from throughout the state that became part of the coalition. Now, when you hear VACOLAO, Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations, it's a volunteer organization. It's all done out of our spare time, of our just simple love for and passion for issues that affect the immigrant community. The initial angle was, of course, the Latino interests, Latino concerns, and how can we advocate for the community. And that was a great way to get everybody to buy in to create the coalition. And then we also began saying, you know what? Some of us have believed always that we cannot work alone, that we have to reach out and see what common ground we have with others. And we began also partnering with organizations like the American Jewish Committee, labor organizations, unions, interfaith groups that really were critical for partnering with VACOLAO to provide resources and spread the word and get more commonality on the issues that we care about. And something called the DREAM Act was some sort of a conversation at that time. And through VACOLAO, we provided a criteria to Mark Warner to consider, would he be able to support something like that as governor? And he said, yes, I am willing to support the criteria, which was at that time essentially graduated from high school, didn't get in trouble, and be able to show that you have roots in the community, pay taxes, or parents. So something that might sound familiar today, 13 years later. And so and Mark Warner said, absolutely, that sounds reasonable. And so if the General Assembly would pass something like that, I will approve it. But we had an uphill climb because that just was something that's not supported. Notwithstanding the wonderful effort of then State Delegate Karen Darnell. How many people here know Karen Darnell? Right, raise your hand. All right. Those of you who don't know her, I hope someday you will meet this wonderful, caring woman who fought, not alone also, with many of some of the people that are in this room. And I see Delegate Vivian White also just joined us. Thank you for joining us here. And so, so VACOLAO began every year. One of the main points to organize was Lobby Day. Now, the people in the General Assembly know that there's a Lobby Day probably every day of the General Assembly session. So another Lobby Day group coming in to lobby about something. But for the Latino community, this was unprecedented, was very significant, and with partners like then, the Virginia Justice Center. I see Tim Riley smiling away. And we were talking earlier that neither one of us had gray hair, and he had curly long hair on at that time.
You still have your hair.
Come a long way. I got gray hairs now. And so we began finding partners in the General Assembly whom we can work with. And frankly, I would like to say that I want to say that we saw bipartisan support. But it seemed that just wasn't the case. And I want to be cautious here because VACOLAO is a nonpartisan organization. We were to work with everyone. But it seemed to me that what I saw is Democrats were friendly to the issues that we cared about. Now, it's all a little bit unfair in a way because Ross Potts, that was a state senator, you might remember, he also embraced some of the issues as well. It's fair to give him credit. Senator Hanger, most recently, also supported coming up with a version of the DREAM Act. So he's a Republican also. It's important to give credit where it's due. So VACOLAO has not only worked with Democrats, so for everybody. In large part, the advocacy and the training that took place in preparation for Lobby Day was very beneficial to many Latino leaders and activists who were there. And I specifically remember the American Jewish Committee, one of the great partners, I see Steve back there, in assisting in providing the know-how. Because some of these things now we might take it for granted, but somebody had to provide the instruction. How do you do that stuff? How do you lobby? How long does it take? Do you have time for a 30-minute conversation with a legislator? Or no? Or do you have, if you only have 30 seconds, what do you do? So you need to come up with your 30-second speech and your 2-minute speech, and then maybe there's time for something else so that we can get the points in a very nice, determined way, but a very polite way of advocating. So I want to also give credit to then State Senator Adam Evan, who now is a state senator and running for Congress, who never hesitated and said, you know what, I'm going to take on this DREAM Act thing and see what we can do about it as a state delegate. And fought the fight, not only for that, but we can run off a long list of issues that Adam advocated in support and protection of immigrant rights. So I'm delighted that most recently, State Delegate Alfonso Lopez also joined the, I think that's if you became state senator, I think. So that was great to have the fight continued and advocating for the DREAM Act. So there's continuity. And VACOLAO was always supporting this type of effort. And having meetings around the state and meeting with different partners in Harrisonburg and Richmond and other parts of the state. So I would say that I was privileged to be asked to be the founding chairman of VACOLAO, but one person should not take all of the credit. everyone who took time to do, all those 400 individuals who took time to come to the Lee Community Center in the city of Alexandria should take the credit for founding VACOLAO, because everyone felt absolutely we have to have a vehicle in which we can continue to have a point of reference, come together, and advocate on behalf of the community. So I think that Lenny and Gonzalez and Andres Tovar and Tim Freilich, a number of other people who were there from the beginning deserve a lot of the credit that the organization has grown. Again, VACOLAO doesn't work alone. I've been pleased to see how it has continued to evolve, and now under the leadership of Edgar Aranellano, who's the present chairman of the coalition, the organization has grown. And I specifically also want to single out, where's the Reverend Linda? She's stepped out. I want to specifically single out the Unitarian Universalist Church here where we are today. They have been full partners in not only supporting, but really embracing and advocating with VACOLAO for the issues that VACOLAO cares about. And over the last 3 or 5 years, I would say also in particular, in fighting for our young people, that make sure that they have a fair opportunity to compete, as the lovely young lady that's standing over there by the door there, and to make sure that we advocate on their behalf, to make sure all they want is a fair chance to compete. They're not asking for special treatment. All they want is make sure that they're able to go to college, continue their education. After the investment we make from K to 12, up until now, the rug had been pulled from under them. And we always thought that that was not good, that was not fair, and I'm delighted where we find ourselves today in that issue. Is all well? No. We still have a way to go. There are a number of things that still are a problem. But I got to tell you that as I saw last year's number of bills that were introduced, there were only a handful that really had an immigrant component. We've come a long way down, from the 133 anti-immigrant bills submitted. I think it was way back 2007 or something like that. 2006, 2007 is when that was the height of the anti-immigrant sentiment, and of course we know that Virginia was leading that anti-immigrant sentiment on the part of many uninformed people. But it was through the lobby days that VACOLAO organized, in which we were able to put a face, like the young person, the young people that come with us, and meet with these legislators and say, actually, what you are talking about aren't just numbers. They're real people, human beings with feelings and with families and with aspirations to become productive members of our community. That you are denying an opportunity is wrong, and we need to fix that. And I would say also that as VACOLAO, also as a nonpartisan organization, should and has and continues to inform which legislators stand for what to the community, so that we know when they're running for elected office what areas we should support or not support. And last year, as many of us in our private capacity advocated for Mark Herring to become our next Attorney General. And in fact, we asked, well, Kenneth, really, what's your platform? And 3 of them said, we are supporting the DREAM Act. And those were McAuliffe, Northam, and Herring. And so some of us felt, again, this is separated from the nonpartisan, the VACOLAO, but VACOLAO is informing, everybody has to make their own decisions. We felt that it would be good to work hard and elect people that supported our issues. And elections do matter. Elections do make a difference. And we now, a couple of weeks ago, for those of you, how many of you were in Northern Virginia Community College a couple of weeks ago? Raise your hand. Let me tell you that some of us are still sky high from the decision that Mark Herring unveiled. After careful analysis of the law, he concluded that, in fact, under the Deferred Action for Children of the DACA program, that kids who qualify as having domicile in the state of Virginia, and then under the Virginia law, they qualify for in-state tuition. I put that in the context of VACOLAO because VACOLAO had been advocating for this for years, and it's a victory, collective victory, for everyone who's had a hand on this. And someone is going to go through the list of all the partners. I mentioned just a few, and as always, when you do that as an elected official, you got to be careful. You leave somebody out, and somebody says, wait a minute, you didn't mention me. You got to be careful. But sometimes you got to give the credit where it's due. And so in a moment, I think there will be more names mentioned to give more context. So I will end by simply asking you to redouble our efforts to support VACOLAO. And remember, others may have paid staff, and that's great if they can do that. VACOLAO is a volunteer organization relying on the will of us as community members to support the causes that the organization is advocating. So I hope that we will continue to do that so that we, as Reverend Linda said, we continue to strive for a just society. And as I mentioned, from my personal perspective, so we'll all collectively continue to pursue that elusive utopia that I hope that someday we will get to, that we will all live happily ever after with no problems. Probably it's an aspiration, we won't get there, but it certainly is worth pursuing, and to organizations like VACOLAO is one way to do it. Thank you for the work VACOLAO is doing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Walter. At this time, we're going to go ahead and move on right next to the next agenda item. We're pleased to have Senator Adam Evan, who has patroned the legislation for notary fraud. Some of you may be aware of this issue. It came up this past year with fraudulent notaries attempting to practice law or legally by saying that they can practice law. And also our good friend Roxana Miller, who is a law student at the University of Virginia, she came to VACOLAO this session and said, I've been working on this issue, can I help? And soon she became the resident expert. So between Senator Evan and Roxana, they're going to tell us about their efforts with notary fraud. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the bill we had on notary fraud or notario fraud or notario publico fraud. And Roxana is a student at, are you still a student? Are you graduating?
I will be graduating.
She's going to be graduating from University of Virginia Law School and did a fantastic job on researching this issue and providing the information needed to pass a bill. So she's going to talk about what she found out about this issue. She's the expert, and I'm going to talk about how we change the law.
Thank you. Okay, so we can start by really understanding what notarial fraud is. Notarial fraud is, a notary is an individual who misrepresents him or herself as being able to provide immigration advice when they in fact are not authorized to do so. And there are several causes of notarial fraud, and one of them is really language barriers. The truth is that most individuals who go to notarios or to attorneys in general for immigration services simply don't speak English, and it's very easy for them to be lured into these fraudulent schemes. And the second is really a confusion about the role of notaries here in the United States and the role of notaries in Latin American countries. So in Latin American countries, a notario publico is a person who can provide legal advice. They are highly educated, and they often receive the same level of education as an attorney here in the United States. But here in the United States, as many of you know, a notary public cannot provide any type of legal advice, including advice in immigration matters. What they can do is they can, administer oaths, take and draft different documents, and even take affidavits. But they certainly cannot provide immigration advice. And so what happens is that individuals who are engaging in these fraudulent schemes know that individuals from Latin American countries have a prior understanding of what a notario is. And so what they'll do is they'll advertise in the newspaper or outside of their business. They'll say something like, Notario Publico, immigration services provided here. And so somebody from Latin America that goes to them and sees that sign thinks, okay, Notario Publico, they're attorneys, they can provide the immigration services that I have. And in fact, they can't. Now, there are several consequences of notarial fraud for victims. And the first is that they lose important documents. A lot of the times, the notarios end up taking birth certificates, vital records that they need later on to prove that they've been here and who they are in front of an immigration judge. And they're just not able to get those documents once again. And the second is that they're defrauded out of hundreds and thousands of dollars for services that are never provided or fraudulent services. And then the last is the foreclosed ability of becoming legal in the United States. So someone who goes to a notario who actually has a claim and can become legal in the United States goes to them, and that notario files fraudulent services, a fraudulent application, and they're no longer able to become U.S. citizens like they would have if that notario had not engaged in that fraudulent activity. So why is legislation needed here in Virginia, and why did we push for this legislation? First, Virginia has the 9th largest immigrant population out of the entire country. And we also rank 6th nationwide in the number of consumer complaints about immigration fraud. It's a serious problem here in Virginia, and a lot of people don't even know that it's occurring. A lot of the victims, you go to them and you ask them, have you been a victim of notarial fraud? And they say, no, of course not. And then you keep asking them questions, and it turns out that they have been. They don't even know that that's illegal, that notario should not have been doing that in the first place. What's also important to understand is that one of the most known notarios actually worked out in McLean, Virginia. His name was Luis Ramirez. He's actually in jail right now. But he was very well known in the community. He was very respected. He even got awards for his work in the Latino community. He was even featured in Univision for all the things that he did for the community. He advertised 3 times on the radio, and he defrauded at least 26 victims here in Virginia out of almost $80,000. It's a big problem, and it's happening here in Virginia, and that's why we need legislation for that.
Thanks, Roxana. You can see she's just a law student, not just a law student, but as a law student at UVA. We were lucky to have her. She was as good as any professional lobbyist on this issue. I want to mention how this bill became a law, and really I think this is great because a lot of times as legislators we get asked, well, what's the best way to advocate? And I think if we walk through the steps on this particular bill, it'll be informative. First off, Edgar Arandellano is here somewhere. He came to me with this issue and with Roxana's research. And he also went to Delegate Lopez, and we talked about what we could do to make it a law. And one of the best things he did to start with was he didn't wait to come to us till during the legislative session when it's too late to put in the bill. Lobby days are important to gain support to advocate for existing legislation that's been introduced, but in terms of just getting the ball started, it's a little bit late. So the best thing to do is to come see us before the session the way Edgar did, or, and if you're advocate even early before the session in town meetings, or in one-on-one meetings, or in campaign debates if it's during an election season, or at the town meetings just before session occurs. So we had some good research, which is important for any bill. And then when we introduced it, we had, the process gets kind of messy. There was a Senate bill, a House bill, and then there were amendments and different changes made in committees. But what we did is Edgar went to see Delegate Albo, and the reason we selected him was he's the chair of the Courts of Justice Committee, and he's a Republican, and we wanted it to be a bipartisan effort. We didn't want to have just Democrats doing it, just Republicans. We wanted to make sure we get support from both. Then we went to committee, and we had, in the Senate at least, we had a valuable ally in the committee, John Edwards, a senator who just happens to be your law professor, right?
Yes.
So he helped a lot because there were all kinds of questions. He said, this is my law student, and she's really good. I know she's been working on this. And her arguments were reason enough to pass the bill, but it was helpful that one senator on the committee was familiar with the issue, or at least with the advocate. And we were asked several questions. We were asked why existing statutes weren't enough, because technically practicing law without a license is already a crime in Virginia. It is. And we were asked, well, gee, why can't we have freedom of speech? Why can't there be a literal translation of the word notary into a different language? Isn't that affecting freedom of speech? So we were able to answer them as this particular need because of this particular kind of fraud. And also what we did is we didn't make it just applying to Spanish. We said if you advertise in any language besides English, these requirements would step in. And what we said, ultimately what we did is we gave the Secretary of the Commonwealth, who is the person who regulates notaries, the power to suspend someone's license more easily. We also prohibited the term from being used, and we specified also liciendo, another term for attorney in Latin America that does not have a comparable English, that is not necessarily an attorney here. And what we wanted to do, there were 2 pieces of the bill that did not end up in the final bill, which we have to work on for next year. One of those was to require people who advertise as notaries who are not attorneys in a language other than English to post in their office something that says they're not an attorney licensed to practice law or give immigration advice. And the second was to, in their advertisements, when they're advertised as notaries, to state the same thing with the disclaimer that they're not accredited to represent people for the U.S. citizenship and immigration services. And we put in penalties as well. Now, in making a law, sometimes things don't go exactly as you want. So in the House, those two pieces didn't pass. And unfortunately, there were people who were on the courts committee who didn't quite understand it. A lot of time, because we're citizen legislators, we're not experts in every issue, and people relate to things personally. So people who were attorneys thought they were going to have to post signs in their offices, which wasn't the case, because this was applying just to people who advertised as notaries in language other than English. And they also thought that the ad disclaimer was also considered to be a hassle by them, and they would not have had to put that disclaimer in their ads. So the way the bill passed the House was without that. In the Senate, we passed it the way we wanted, but we couldn't get the House of Delegates, we couldn't be assured that they would agree to that. So we were told if we took it out that there was a chance we could get the governor to fix it. And the governor didn't fix it for this year, but we're hopeful that Governor McAuliffe will make it a priority for next year to even strengthen the statute further. So, Davis, if we have the time to take one or two questions, we can do that about either the problem or about any advice we can give you in advocating for other bills. I might have been confusing speaking legislative speak. Yes?
Is notarial apply to all Latin countries? It could have a double meaning of attorney, and what if somebody was also an attorney as well as a notarial?
So the word notario applies to most Latin American countries. So if an attorney is also a notary, which happens in many instances, they are not covered under the statute. The statute only applies to non-attorney notaries.
If I may, you mentioned the word with Roxana regarding the notaries fraudulently filed. Does it require an attorney to file for the immigration status, or an application for immigration status for a undocumented immigrant, or can a notario do any of that at all, or just they can't misrepresent that they're lawyers? Or I'm trying to differentiate because I didn't understand whether it required a person to be a lawyer in order to apply for someone on behalf of somebody to become to start the process of legal status.
That's a great question. And a notary, if that person is not an attorney, they cannot fill out the form for you and tell you which form to go to. That's providing legal advice in immigration matters. What they can do is they can translate that form for you, and Simon actually knows more about it, so you can go ahead.
Well, I would just follow up on that, is that even more importantly than filling out the form is the discretion to determine whether someone should or should not fill out the form, right? Because if you apply for legal status that you actually don't qualify, you're going to end up getting deported, right? And so that's why a lawyer is necessary to even just determine whether or not this person should be filling out a form in the first place and which form they should be filling out. So it's not just a question of, translating questions on a form into English. It's a question of really the discretion to understand whether someone should apply for a form of legal status, whether they need a waiver or not, because if you need a waiver, you don't apply for a waiver, your application's going to get denied, etc.
Just a comment, it seems like this would be a perfect campaign for VACOLAO and others probably to start indicating notarios cannot provide you assistance in filing these things. I mean, literally an education campaign to do this, because even I did not know the differentiation.
Make sure when you're getting advice, get the right person.
Yes.
Last question. Yes, ma'am.
The problem is that it's very easy to say that a lawyer will file those papers. But I'm a social worker, and I'm always begging everybody for help. And most of my clients don't have the money. They don't have money, $1,200, $1,500 to file a simple paper. That's what the problem is.
Well, the essence of the bill, if I might say, is that you cannot represent yourself as an attorney, cannot represent yourself that way if you're not an attorney. It doesn't say that you can't be a paralegal and say, I'm a paralegal, but you're not allowed to represent yourself and say you're an attorney and give that impression. Doesn't mean that you can't tell me this is how I filled out my form, but you're not licensed as an attorney. If you're not, you're not.
Which is why also the next step for VACOLAO would be to regulate and recognize immigration assistance. So there are 2 states that do this, Georgia and Illinois. Instead of saying, notaries can't provide any type of advice that might lead to individuals not being able to provide translation services on immigration forms, what they do is they heavily regulate it, and they give each immigration assistant a certificate. And they're able to provide services, not legal advice, because only attorneys can do that. So it's maybe another step that we want to go in this way.
Let's give the Senator and Roxanne a big round of applause for all their work. Thank you so much. I'm going to hastily move things along and welcome Delegate Vivian Watts, who will talk to us a little bit about voter ID. Thank you, Delegate Watts.
Because you're going to see when you read this handout part of what the problem is. The problem that I'm dealing with is that throughout the many, many volumes of state law, the code, the words full name are used at least 40 different times. In no place is it defined what full name means. So as we look at voter ID, not only currently, but also when we go to government-issued photo ID, we have a serious problem of what full name means. My bill, because I thought the handout that I'm giving you just speaks for itself, the logic of it all, simply says reasonably matches the full name on the ID. Because as you see in the handout that I give you, and I'm going to go through it, there are a number of reasons why it might not be an identical match. But before I speak to that, I want to underscore what my deepest concern is. Not that any one individual may not be able to vote, as serious as that is, because there is not a match. My far deeper concern is that when I first moved to Virginia from Michigan, it was obviously a few years ago, and we still had what was called blank sheet registration. I actually went to an individual person's house, and I had to fill out what I was supposed to fill out on a blank sheet. Now, there was no problem in me registering. Blue eyes, blonde, no problem. But certainly, absolutely, in those days, and the poll tax was part of it, there were African Americans who were supposed to be able to write a section of the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or whatever question the registrar decided to ask. Again, let me underscore the concern that I have is the discriminatory way in which this problem of full name is going to be applied in the thousands of precincts out there. I recently, for example, and I don't have it with me, I wish I did, I have frequently heard over the years from a gentleman that I've represented for quite a long time, and I can only describe that he's Tea Party, because there's a lot of things that he really reams me out for doing wrong. And he signs his name, and I just noticed it as D.I. space S.I. and I don't remember the rest of his name. I look at his voter record, and it's all strung out as one word, D-I-S, Now, I assume that this very active individual in his community, should he get challenged at the poll, and he's probably multi-generational Virginian, would not take for a moment the challenge that, in fact, his government-issued government-issued ID does not match the poll books. But that is the situation that we will be dealing with, is the discriminatory way in which someone looks at somebody and challenges that the names aren't the same. And by the way, the concern that I have that is right now, I was just talking with Janice Yohai, who's been doing a lot of work on registration, but also absentee ballots. And while I need to absolutely confirm this, I will say that Janice told me that last year, a quarter of the absentee ballots that came in were rejected because on the face of the absentee ballot, the address was not identical to what it was on the poll books. It could be this difference of an apartment number being different. It could be, again, a spelling issue. 1/4 were rejected. So that when I was told, when I presented this bill, and again, I thought it was so logical that last year, I just wanted to correct the problem. I was assuming that people would, of course, see there was a problem. I was told by some, oh, we don't need that because that's the way that we instruct our registrars. Again, the concern is discrimination because it's not being followed in certain jurisdictions. It's not being followed by certain individuals who are the poll officers. And certainly if you don't have it in the law, what full name means, or that it's to be a reasonable match, then the full backing goes to the individual poll official who says it's not a match. It's supposed to be the full name. And now let me quickly go down some of those examples. And as I do, let me first start by saying I represent Springfield, Annandale. It used to be arguably tied for the most diverse. Now, okay, I'll accede with redistricting. I lost a couple of precincts and I am second most diverse. Two. Pardon? Two. To Alfonso Lopez. And I'm not sure about your diversity, but I just know that going door to door since 2001, when I got the bulk of the district I now represent, and different today, that I have a diversity that spans the whole gamut. You may be here on a political asylum, you're a professor from El Salvador, or you may have walked up from Honduras. You may be a boat person from Southeast Asia, or you may be military from Vietnam or Cambodia. I certainly have a lot of Korean and Japanese and Chinese, but I also have former Soviet bloc country people who, and again, all of these that I am referring to are people on whose door I've knocked, and I know that they are registered voters, each and every one of them. So I see, first of all, as we start out, the misspellings. And all of these examples, with the exception of one, come from looking at my registered voter list, about 80,000 that we represent, and just looking down the first 250, 300 organized by registered voter number, not alphabetically. The one exception is in that first example of misspellings. Jan Hadamimi, and I'm just learning really to say her name correctly. Jan has a Greek origin. She was just named Fairfax County Citizen of the Year. She has been a professional woman, active for years. But look at her name as the last example on misspellings, and tell me all the ways in which DMV might have misspelled her name, or that the State Board of Elections might have misspelled her name. And by the way, I still run my own registered voter updates every month, and every month I get from the State Board of Elections approximately anywhere from 200 to 400 corrections or deletions or additions. And of course, there's always a portion of them that are changes in spelling of names. One of which I noted, I was going door to door a year or so ago when this first started to truly, deeply concern me, when we again tightened down voter ID. And I said to this gentleman, I said, you might want to check your registered voter list because you have your name spelled with only one L for O'Connell and your wife has it spelled with two L's. I don't know which is which, but you might want to check that out, and I noted that that correction was made. But you again can see that that spelling goes across all ethnic groups, all degrees of residency in Virginia, and my concern is how it will be applied at the poll as to who will be challenged. Because as you go down, another thing that I ran into was I looked on the web and I said, okay, I was talking with a Latino gentleman, and he was telling me that, well, on my passport, the guy insisted that my full name be there. Well, in his case, it was 6 or 7 different names, all strung out. And I'm thinking, okay, what does the passport office normally do as far as applying this issue of full name? Well, you look on the website, and it's wonderful. It gives you advice to bring in your standard ID, and this should be enough as far as how your passport is filled out. And then from the website, I am quoting the words that say, of course, it'll be up to the individual officer as to what he actually puts down. Which actually, of course, again, underscores my concern of each and every bureaucracy, and I don't say that disparagingly, each and every bureaucracy will have its own set of rules as far as these matching names and how they apply it, and each and every individual, whether they're hearing it correctly when they record it, whether you have written clearly enough so that an A or an E is properly interpreted, or whether or not your name, because you registered forever ago, was, as we used to call it, Ellis Islandized, as far as changing to what was more acceptable as far as, at that time, United States spelling of a name as opposed to the complexity. And many people had their names changed, and you'll see as I start out this example that a former delegate who's now a judge had his name changed back as a Filipino to what the traditional spelling had been in the Philippines. But of course, let me just quickly run through, and please correct me if I'm wrong, except that there was a court case that underscored this. Court case mentioned on the flip side that court case, I believe in California, where a contract was voided because the last name on the contract was not the individual's name that appeared last in the string of names by which he was known. And what that was referring to, as I understood it, and again, please correct me as I'm wrong, because I want this issue to go forward without challenge on any basis, is that it's traditional in a Latino culture for you to go by both your father's surname and your mother's surname, with the mother's surname being the last appearing name, but it is not the name that you go by. You are going by your name and your father's surname, so that I would normally refer to you as Garcia. But since the contract was filled out in that way, but the last appearing name was Mendez, then the contract was voided because it wasn't truly the last name by the standards that were applied by the court looking at this, which is exactly coming back to the voting poll of voting decision, poll decision, what is your last name? I don't run into it very much in Hispanic Latino culture names, but I definitely run across it all the time in Asian culture names, where at the same household it appears there may be 3 different families with 3 different surnames. But in fact, that there is a common name that in one voter registration appears as the middle name, another one it appears as first name, another one it appears as the last name. Again, partly because traditionally in some cultures, some Southeast Asian cultures, last names, surnames just weren't part of the culture. So the importance put on a last name is not all that great. So all of these differences play out, as was said by a previous speaker. Here in the Commonwealth, We're the 9th highest in the nation in the number of people who were born in another country, come from another culture, come from another tradition. And unfortunately, we do have situations where this is not the kind of positive, forward-looking, or part of the world culture that should be embraced by each and every Virginian. We do have situations where this is disturbing to some, and at the polls will be a reason to challenge the vote, either for what I'm implying, straight-out discrimination, or just wanting to absolutely do it by the book. Let me stop with one final example, and then if we have time for perhaps one question, that would be great, or two, whatever works for you. And that is just simply that I was at DMV a couple of weeks ago. Haven't had time to pursue this, but won't go into why both my husband and I ended up on crutches for about 4 weeks, but it's another chapter in our marriage and we're still married. But was fascinated when I applied for the temporary handicap parking sticker, which, by the way, talking about cultural sensitivity, handicap is not a word that we should be using. It should be disabled. Handicap traditionally comes from the word hat in hand. Beggars, disabled people begging for help because they can't do anything. So if a little cultural sensitivity there. But when I filled out the DMV form for the handicap placard, it read full legal name. Now, what in the world does legal mean in DMV? Why did they stick it in? It does not appear in the code as full legal name, but it certainly has, again, no more definition than what I've just talked about as far as full name. So that I sincerely hope that as we move forward, both into the fall administratively, I'll be working as hard as I can on the training issue to make sure that, in fact, this claim that, oh, it's not a problem, we'll train our poll workers, is in fact carried out. But we also need to be very, very alert at the polls themselves as far as legal counsel, and then hopefully next session, without question, bipartisan, broadly supported by all ethnic representations, that we get a correction and just make it reasonable, which I said it was going to be the last word. Reasonable match needs to be for address as well. Because again, it's going after people who are renters, who are moving from one apartment to the other, going after people who have lower incomes, and going after students.
Thank you, One question, yes, sir.
What you say resonates with me. You mentioned an example, and we have an example in here. Edgar Lorena-Allen.
Yeah.
My wife, Lorena Leslie, goes by her middle name, Gilmore Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
What's her legal name?
What's her legal name? Does that hyphen make a difference or not?
Yeah, I also wanted to say that this is not it. We're gonna keep fighting for everybody else that don't have DACA, that don't qualify. So I want to thank everybody that made that possible. And you know, this is gonna keep. It's gonna be a long fight, but this is one of our victories. So thank you.
Thank you. So the way this is going to work, we're going to have Tim Freilich, who is Legal Director with Legal Aid Justice Center's Immigrant Advocacy Program. We're going to have Simon Sandoval Moschenberg. He's an attorney with Legal Aid Justice Center's Immigrant Advocacy Program also. And we're going to have Delegate Alfonso Lopez, who's patron to this legislation for a long time, speak in that order. And then if we have time, we will hopefully invite a couple of questions. But first we'll start with Tim. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to recognize Senator Saslaw has walked in. Thank you for joining us this morning. Yep. So this is a celebratory panel that we have up here because, as everybody knows, on April 29th, Attorney General Herring announced that students with DACA are eligible for in-state tuition. I asked Edgar if we could have a flip chart so I could make a list of all the folks who have contributed to this effort, in making the list, I realized that it is far too long. But I'm going to try to do what Walter said was a really bad idea. Okay, and I'm going to recruit everybody in this room, all right, as we talk about who made this happen, because it's really remarkable when you look at all the people who have contributed. I want to start first with the students. In particular, there's a student, and I've been asking around, none of us can even remember her name, but I believe she was an Arlington valedictorian who came down to Richmond during the General Assembly to speak out in front of one of the panels down there in one of the hearings against a ban on a ban on admission to public colleges and universities in Virginia. And she got up there and she gave beautiful, moving testimony about how she wanted to go to JMU, how she hoped to be a doctor someday, she wanted to continue on to medical school, but that when she was applying for financial aid, that was the first time she'd learned that she didn't have a Social Security number. And so there she was, down, she gave stirring testimony, some of the most beautiful, heartfelt testimony I've heard in the General Assembly. At the end, somebody on the panel actually asked her and said, "Excuse me, thank you for your testimony. You didn't say your name, right?" And she said, "Well, you know, I spoke with a couple attorneys before I got up here to speak, and they advised me that I shouldn't mention my name because of my status. But my name is," and she said her name, and Claire Guthrie Gastillaga and I were there, and we were like, "No!" But it was at that moment that I knew that someday the students were going to win this. And so this win is dedicated to her and all the students in particular. Here in Virginia, we have another incredible activist, Isabel Castillo, who came out of Harrisonburg out of nowhere in a town hall meeting with Governor McDonald, and was, to my knowledge, the first, at least broadly talked about, student in Virginia who came out as undocumented and unafraid in the town hall in Harrisonburg. It was an incredible moment, captured on videotape. Check it out on YouTube. She founded Dream Activist Virginia, a group that has been working this issue for years. Now I'm going to start speeding up. That mantle has been picked up by Dreamers of Virginia, Mason Dreamers, Dreamers Moms of Virginia, the Dream Project, Star of Hakan, and all along you have these amazing individual students, Diana Torres, Amber Pinto, Jungbin Cho, an intern from Nakasek, who has really stepped up publicly on this issue as well, Jaret Andrade, Rebecca Orellana, Oswaldo from Dreamers, who we just heard from, the 7 students who sued back in December to elevate the issue, Giancarlo Rojas and several others, the many who have testified down in Richmond over the years in the General Assembly. Related to the students as well, it would be a tragedy not to recognize the high school teachers and guidance counselors who would call our offices and the groups that we're all affiliated with and the elected officials saying, "I have this student, what is he or she supposed to do?" Those dedicated teachers that really reached out. Elected officials, obviously. Walter mentioned Delegate Darner's bill from 2003 on this issue. A legislative effort that has been carried on by many in the General Assembly, most notably Delegate Lopez from Arlington as well, leading the effort legislatively on those bills. Delegate Lopez has of course been joined by many others, Delegate Russ, Delegate Corey, Delegate Watts, Senators Evan, McEachin, Howell, Hanger, Potts, right? Republicans who kicked in on the effort as well. Senator Saslaw. You had local elected officials, Walter Tejada of the Arlington County Board, Emma Villan Sanchez, right? First Latina elected school board official in Virginia, founded the Dream Project, continues to do tremendous work. Obviously, Attorney General Herring for his announcement, and his team of attorneys and others who worked to make this happen last week, and Governor McAuliffe for being supportive. The advocacy organizations, also way too many to mention, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to make sure everybody's getting the credit. VACOLAO, right? Walter talked a bunch about the work of Andres, Lenny, Edgar, now Demas as the lobbyist over the years. The Coalition of Asian Pacific and Americans of Virginia, who have really joined this effort in recent years as well. My organization, Legal Aid Justice Center. I want to particularly recognize actually my co-panelist up here, Simon Sandoval Motionberg. There was a lot of folks. who wanted to see this happen. And Simon, I think, gets the credit for realizing at a time when all of us thought a change in the law was going to be needed in order to make this happen, Simon realized that under existing law, there was a very strong legal argument that could be made that students with DACA were eligible for in-state tuition. A huge contribution to the effort. The ACLU of Virginia and their executive director, Claire Guthrie Gastañaga, who for 10 years, I think, was the lobbyist for VACOLAO in the General Assembly. Tremendous contributions. Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, Virginia New Majority, Virginia Organizing. Remember, mentioning their names. One thing that must be stated is the importance, as Walter said, elections matter and the voters matter, because this would obviously not have happened without folks coming out in November and casting the votes for folks who actually support access to higher education for these students. LULAC, the NAACP, the Virginia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce with Michelle Zager at the helm there. Damus is also there. The National Korean American Service and Education Consortium, NACASEC, who I mentioned. Happy to have them joining the effort lately. American Jewish Committee has been a steadfast supporter over the years. CASA Virginia has joined the struggle. Just Neighbors has done a ton of DACA cases. Let's see. All the churches and faith groups are hosts, the UUCA, St. Charles Borromeo, Sacred Heart in Richmond, Our Lady Queen of Peace, the Interfaith Council of Churches, the Church of the Incarnation down in Charlottesville. Let's see, the Commonwealth Institute, a couple more advocacy organizations, the Commonwealth Institute for Fiscal Policy, for helping give data, putting the numbers out there under a bunch of the different arguments. SALT, Social Action Linking Together. In the General Assembly, at a few of the hearings, particularly in the last couple years, when these bills have come up in the House Higher Ed Subcommittee, there has been a stunning lack of opposition to the bills in the House Education Subcommittees. Instead, we had a bunch of chambers of commerce and a bunch of Virginia's leading public colleges and universities. Northern Virginia Community College, George Mason, Virginia Tech, Piedmont Community College, VCU, William and Mary Washington, and representing the University of Virginia, my alma mater, who I was very disappointed did not stand up in support of the bill, but I understand President Sullivan supports access to higher education for these students. The Latino Student Alliance at the University of Virginia has been working this issue for years, so congratulations to them as well. Let's see. And now I'm going to throw it to you people. Who have we forgotten?
What about President Obama for creating the DACA in the first place?
Excellent. President Obama for creating DACA. Oh, yes, American Jewish Committee is on here. Yep.
Jewish Community Relations Council.
Oh, Jewish Community Relations Council. Okay, thank you, Debbie. Oh, okay, sorry.
County Chamber of Commerce.
Yep, what's that?
Fairfax
County Chamber of Commerce. I know the Dulles Chamber also has come out at times. Yep. Centerville Immigration Forum.
Yeah, we've led some undocumented workers.
Yep.
Who have, for the first time ever, spoken to delegates.
Excellent. Yeah, Centerville Immigration Forum doing great work out there as well. Other folks?
Who actually drafted in the White House that very beautiful language that allowed them to have that path to go forward in the council's office and then over to DOJ.
Yep. The language drafters. Give it up for the language drafters. All right. I'm going to go ahead and I just wanted to, oh wait, I have one last thing I wanted to mention. No more recognitions, but sort of to echo what Oswaldo said earlier. Yes. Yes.
There is one person that I'd like to mention, probably, as far as you all know, wasn't that heavily involved, but he talked to other legislators. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was at a dinner that the Hispanic community had for outstanding high school graduates out on 29 right before you get to the Beltway. And a young lady came up to me from Fairfax City High School who had a 4.2 average, and her mother brought her here when she was 7 or 8 years old. So she applied, she got accepted everywhere, and she couldn't pay the out-of-state tuition. That was the bottom line. I called Paul Tribble. A lot of you may know who he is, some of you may not. He's a former Republican United States Senator. He was president of Christopher Newport. And I explained the situation to him. And about he says, let me see what I can do. 48 hours later, he called me back. He had rounded up the private money to take care of her 4 years at Christopher Newport. But he pointed out, he says, I can't do this for the thousands of people who need to be here. And he says, I've talked to people and more or less said to me, y'all aren't doing your job in doing this. And he didn't have to do what he did. And it was things like this probably why Paul never became governor. So that's somebody else that y'all should remember. Also, you'll remember all the years they put in those bills. There were bills put in starting back in the mid-90s, education and health in the Senate, that would have barred these students from even coming and paying out-of-state tuition. And year after year after year, we had to kill those bills. They'd all get through the House, and we'd kill them in the Senate. And one of the people who, you mentioned him, who started the ball rolling within the Republican Party was Emmett Hanger. And what he did was he copied the law in Texas that became law when Bush was governor. So there were a lot of people, some you mentioned, some you didn't.
Yeah, well, I tried to get as many as I can, obviously. I also wanted to include everybody in this room who cares enough about the issues impacting immigrants in the General Assembly to come out to events like this. It's really important that everybody stay active. Finally, to echo what Osvaldo was saying, well, this is a great victory. There is still a lot of work to be done. DACA in-state tuition is obviously just the beginning. What these students really need is a path to citizenship on the federal level. And so there's a bunch of work to be done there. I'll also remind you, already we've started to hear from students who don't qualify for DACA, right? What about the 15-year-old who came here 6 years ago instead of 7? Okay, what are we going to do about him? So we have a lot of work left to do, but I want to end with an uplifting story, and that is one of our plaintiff clients who, at the time we filed the lawsuit back in December, he was a part-time student at Piedmont when we filed. He was working part-time to try to earn enough money to pay out-of-state tuition. He dropped out, unfortunately, to work full-time this last semester, and he's now been back in touch with us. His family's plan was that he would continue working full-time to pay his younger sister's way through college. And then when she graduated, she would work full-time to pay his way through. So he was going to wait his turn. They've now contacted us and said with Attorney General Herring's announcement, they'll both be registering for the summer session. And so we're very excited for him.
I just want to make a clarification if I may, Tim, because I was at the meeting when Senator Hanger had proposed the anti-immigrant bill that he had, and he came up to, I believe you were there, Tim, and Claire Castañaga and myself and Sarah, who were there to testify against this bill. He came over and says, I would like to fix this bill. I am totally with you. And they went back and revised it, and what we heard was Senator Hanger's son had gotten engaged with a lady from the Philippines. He became informed about the disarray in the immigration system. He said, we've got to fix it. Let me see how I can help. But that was really the turning point, and I realized you were advising us, let's kill this bill before it comes back worse than it is. And we said, let's go, let's hope. And at least it passed the Senate, but died in the village. But you were awesome, Senator. I'm delighted you're here again, and continue.
I just want to speak for a few seconds about nuts and bolts about what this announcement actually means, what it actually does. We're not going to go into great detail right now because the program is running behind schedule, but the most important thing that I want to announce is that on Monday, the 19th of May, right here at this very same spot, at 6:30, we're going to be having an event in which we go into a lot more detail. It's sort of a community information session, and even you could call it a training as to how to actually use this, how folks with DACA can actually go about applying for in-state tuition. It's important to understand this does not mean that, for example, every student with DACA is going to have their tuition status automatically upgraded to in-state tuition without even having to do anything, right? So there's two really important things to understand. The first is, under Virginia law, someone has to be domiciled for a full year prior to the start of classes in order to qualify for in-state tuition that year. So, therefore, what that means is that if you get DACA, if you're approved for DACA today, it doesn't mean, unfortunately, that you qualify for in-state tuition tomorrow. You have to wait a full year. And it has to be a full year prior to the start of classes in that term. So for many folks, that can be a little more than a year. Now, obviously, anyone who's had their DACA status for a full year should go ahead and apply to have their status upgraded to in-state tuition immediately. And anyone who's shy of a year needs to just essentially mark that date in their calendar, and the day they hit the 1 year mark, they should apply to have their status upgraded to in-state. And the second point I wanted to make is you do actually have to apply for it. Even once you hit the 1 year mark, there's nothing automatic about it. You have to apply for it. There are forms that you have to fill out. There are various documents that you have to attach to those forms. We all know that for students with undocumented parents, they will have some students will have a greater difficulty of actually providing those types of documents. This is why we're having this training on May the 19th, Monday, May the 19th at 6:30, to go into much greater detail as to what types of information you need to put on the various forms, what types of documents you need to attach to your form. You know, what do you need to staple to the form when you're applying for in-state tuition? And what is the appeals process if you get incorrectly denied in-state tuition, notwithstanding the fact that you've had DACA for over a year now? I will say personally that I probably get about 2 cases a year of people who are U.S. citizens, U.S.-born people of undocumented parents who are nonetheless denied in-state tuition when they first apply, and I have to help them appeal. Now, in every single case, we've managed to win those appeals and get them qualified for in-state tuition. We've certainly never had to take it to court yet. But as we know, nearly every student with DACA has undocumented parents. And so there are going to be a number of cases where things get a little screwy, to use the technical legal term. It's very important to put together a proper application and to understand what the appeal process is, because the appeal deadlines are often measured in a matter of days. And if you miss your appeal deadline, you're out of luck for the semester. So I hope everyone has taken a copy of this. Take multiple copies, give them out far and wide. And please be sure to be here on Monday night, the 19th, right here at 6:30, where we'll go into much greater depth about the nuts and bolts of how to actually apply for in-state tuition. I think we're taking questions at the end.
Morning, everybody. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and then I'm going to tell you about what we still need to do. Because at the end of the day, what we've accomplished is still just temporary. It's not set in stone. By way of background, a lot of people in this room knew my mom. She worked with Emma Viola Sanchez on dreamer issues before we called them dreamers, before we called our children dreamers. She was working with the Legal Aid Justice Center. She was one of those guidance counselors and teachers calling about her kids to get them into school and getting them full rides to private universities outside of Virginia, valedictorians at Washington Lee High School, or people with straight A's, and just pulling her hair out thinking, why aren't we able to do this in Virginia? Not as many people knew about my dad. My dad came here when he was 19 years old on a tourist visa and was undocumented for 3 months. And in the late 1950s, he decided, I want to stay here. So it took him 5 days to get a green card. That included a weekend. 5 days. Today it takes approximately 7 years on average, if not longer. As Fralick said, we have a broken immigration system at the federal level. We need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to pass the strong but fair pathway to citizenship that was negotiated in the old way by the U.S. Senate. And the House needs to take it up. They shouldn't do it piecemeal. It's got to be the comprehensive bill or nothing. It's all well and good to pass the popular sections, the H-1B visa reform, L-1B visa reform, the DREAM Act, at the federal level, but it needs to be comprehensive. Dick, would you turn that off?
Mark Warner tells me to leave it on.
Whatever.
I'll turn it down.
Here's where we are. There were tears, there was joy, there was jubilation a week ago. It was an incredible, incredible morning. We worked for 9 months with McCullough, with Herring, literally having, every time I saw Mark Herring, I said, here's what I want you to do on the DREAM Act. Here's what I need you to do on the DREAM Act. And then when he got elected, meeting with him every few weeks and his team. And then during session, saying, Mr. O'Halloran, we have to get this done. Here's how it happens. We do the legislation first. Then, if we're not successful, we go to you to get some kind of opinion from the AG's office. And then we go to the governor's office. And here's how you make it work. Because there is this beautiful pathway to interpret the current federal law and the current state law regarding domiciliary intent. But it's temporary. I saw something from a noted organization that said, now we've got DREAM Act, we can move on to licenses. If somebody tells you that, kick them in the shins. Because I know, as well as a lot of people in this room, we're under attack. What just got done, there will be at least 3 or 4 bills to overturn this next year. We can't move on to the next issue. We have to continue fighting to defend the DREAM Act. What that means is I will be working, as will everyone else, to get data, statistics with the State Council on Higher Education and with the Secretary of Education to track how this works and to prove that it has no fiscal impact and to show that we're helping and not hurting the system. We need to get the data because we need to be prepared for early January 2015. Because they're coming. They're coming. And it's not, I don't care that you're nonpartisan. It's Republicans. It's Tea Party Republicans. And we know who they are. And they're coming. We can't sit on our heels and think that we're done. Because we have to defend the dream. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Delegate Lopez and other panelists. We appreciate your insight. 2 or 3 questions. Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask you if the dreamers, they can apply with this law for the financial aid or the FAFSA?
So no, dreamers still do not qualify for federal financial aid. There are a lot of private and local scholarships that require you to fill out a FAFSA. As of today, unfortunately, folks with DACA can't even fill out a FAFSA. I'm working with a number of different organizations, working with the U.S. Department of Education to try to get them to modify the FAFSA so that dreamers will be able to at least take the FAFSA so that they can bring their FAFSA results to these organizations, like, for example, the Arlington Community Foundation and other such organizations. But dreamers, nonetheless, still will not be able to get federal aid such as Pell Grants, Stafford, et cetera. That's simply not.
But they may qualify for state aid since they're eligible for in-state tuition.
Right, and I think one of the difficulties there is going to be applying for the FAFSA because my understanding is that the state uses
money involved
the FAFSA as well. That's definitely something we're looking into, and I think the first step is working with the Department of Education to get the FAFSA changed so that DACA students and even undocumented folks can at least use that online tool even if they can't get the federal money.
So we're working on it. 2 more questions. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's very astute to say we didn't find a legislative path to pass DACA.
There was always a House avenue to kill that bill in appropriations. But when you talk about defending DACA, what about the idea of expanding the eligibility? Does that effort need to happen at the federal, or do we have avenues to work on that at the state level?
Both. I mean, we need to at the federal level, but at the state level, we need to be defending DACA this year or next year, and then expanding to all Dreamers soon after that. And that's my path, at least.
You're told that when they apply for DACA, they put the forms, and they only will be eligible for the next school year, am I right? Because the DACA, like 1 year after is January. They cannot change it to start paying state tuition in January to July, or it's going to be started in September again.
Right. Well, so I think our sheet explains it pretty well, but you have to have had your status for a full year prior to the first day of classes of the term that you seek to qualify for in-state tuition.
That's the same as if you moved here from a different state and had to live in Virginia for 12 months. Yes, ma'am.
The question is for Simon. Simon, 1 day of training, not everybody can attend. And can you also give us who can attend to the meeting? Who would be the best person to help those people, to help the students?
Well, we hope that as many people as possible will attend the training on the 19th. Of course, not everyone will be able to make it. We'll be generating more materials. I mean, this two-pager goes a long way, I think, and we'll also be generating more materials as time goes by.
And we can look on your website also.
And everything we put up will be on the Legal Aid Justice Center website, and VACOLAO usually posts things of this nature as well. Yes.
At the request of Delegate Lopez, one final question.
My name is Perla, and I just want to say that this really helped me, the state tuition, because I'll be able to transfer now. But I have a question. With the bill that's going to be introduced in January, will it only be for undocumented, or also only for DACA, also undocumented students?
Part of the approach that Republicans might take will be to gut my bill, no matter what it is, and then try to keep my name on it, or Adam Evans' name on it, and then have it do the exact opposite of what we want it to do. I would try, there's many different things they could do procedurally, so we're trying to work out what approach we need to take. My ultimate goal will be to expand beyond just DACA students to include all Dreamers, but we need to be smart about what steps we take and when.
Thank you to our panelists.